Hello everybody, today I'll be discussing yet another tribe from the Battle of Polytopia in the hopes of better understanding them and giving you tips as to how to play them. First though, a bit of a disclaimer. Today I'm going to be poking a lot of fun both at Quetzali and the way they interact with the game's latest update, that being diplomacy. This is not to say though that I dislike the update in any way, and in actual fact I think diplomacy is possibly the best update this game has ever had, so just bear that in mind going forwards. So then, today we arrive at every new player's favourite tribe and the third worst tribe in the game, Quetzali. This video is going to follow the same format as I did for the Aquarium video, in other words a lengthy introductory joke, followed by me talking about how rubbish the tribe is for 2 minutes and then rolling the credits. But things have changed a bit in terms of Quetzali because of the recent diplomacy update, which has been in open beta for several months now, and will, in a matter of just one day at the time of recording, release as a general update for the game for everyone. You see, Quetzali start the game with what used to be called the Shields tech, allowing them to build defenders straight away, and they start off with a defender as well. This doesn't on the face of it sound bad, but when you consider that the two most important things in Polytopia are economics and belligerent aggression, and Quetzali fails at both, I think you begin to see the problem. With the advent of diplomacy though, this has changed. The technology in question is now called strategy rather than shields, and it allows you to send peace treaties to other players in the game. That is, as well as allowing you to build defenders. For those of you who do have the beta, of course, this next section is going to be a bit of a recap for you, since you already know what's in the update, but this is virtually the only interesting thing about Quetzali, so I'm going to need to take a bit of a brief moment to run through the update thoroughly and make sure everyone is on the same page. So the technology allows you to send peace treaties as well as making defenders now. The way these treaties work is that if you accept the treaty, you'll not be able to attack the other party in the treaty, and you'll have all of your troops in their territory removed and not be able to attack them for one turn if you break the treaty at any point. So treaties are a long-term commitment, fine. But immediately cracks begin to show as far as Quetzali is concerned. In a multiplayer match, for one thing, it's useless because treaties are either pre-arranged or disallowed typically. Now that's a minority of players who pre-arrange their games through Discord or the like, but even in less organised games or bot games you rarely get any real terms benefit from these treaties as Quetzali, since you'll nearly always be at a disadvantage early on, meaning nobody will have any real incentive to join your treaties in the first place. As I said, it's a commitment, and people won't commit to an alliance with you, not even a bot, if they don't think it will benefit them. The AI has been significantly improved in this last update. So Quetzali don't get any immediate benefit out of the ability to sign peace treaties, simply because they are so disadvantaged that situations in which anyone would actually accept your treaty as Quetzali are usually later on, when most tribes either already have the strategy tech or don't need it. Just as a brief aside, obviously if your opponent happens to be playing Aquarion or IMO for reasons best known to them, then this doesn't apply, and you might well be on equal footing or even ahead of them in the early game, and in that case it can be useful. So it's not all bad though. If you happen to be an experienced player and like playing Quetzali, again for these reasons best known to you, then the ability to send immediate peace treaties is one more tool in your kit, just not one you actually need to use very often. On top of that, there's another technology that's been added to the branch as well, so let's move on to that to see how that affects Quetzali. Again, I'm mindful that most, if not all, of my subscribers already know this, so I'll try to be brief. The new tech that's been added is called diplomacy, and in effect it allows any player to create an embassy in the capital of another player, which provides you both with 2 stars per turn, so long as you aren't at war. It also allows you to build the cloak unit, which can sneak around while staying invisible, and spawn troops that are basically upgraded warriors near enemy cities if they are able to get in close. Naturally, having access to this tech faster than anyone else is an upside to be considered on Quetzali, but the basic problem with using this as your main tech is the same basic problem as with strategy. Think of it from the perspective of a neighbouring tribe. You're playing, let's say, Kiku. You have 4 level 4 cities, or any number of level 4 cities really, and you have the largest army in the game. Quetzali show up with a couple of level 1 cities and say, hey, do you want to be friends? Do you either A, destroy them and take over their land, or B, negotiate a peace agreement and thereby hamper your expansion and have another person who you need to worry about? Simply put, to make anybody think it's worth even being friends with you in the first place, you need some kind of leverage over them, not just in Polytopia but in any strategy game. Quetzali doesn't have that leverage early on. As for cloaks, this is probably the best part of the new update as far as Quetzali is concerned, but even then they're no real match for tribes with a better economy doing exactly the same thing. Now I know that at least one of you is currently typing me an angry message to say that actually Quetzali's economy isn't that bad and it could be worse and whatnot. Now while it is certainly true that there exist several tribes in the game whose economies are even worse than Quetzali's, Vengia, I'm looking at you, Quetzali have a unique blend of problems when it comes to their economy. Tribe has almost no farms but a good deal of fruit, meaning nearly every game you'll find yourself researching organization just to stop there because farming is useless and you already have strategy. Then you have a good deal of forest you want to chop, but in my experience hunting often isn't worth it because of your mediocre animal spawn rate. So how do we make any use of Quetzali at all, given all of this to them? Well, I've narrowed the range of effective middle game strategies down to just a couple here, so I'll talk about those first. As Quetzali, the most important thing in the middle game is to level up your cities as standard, and decide on your route out of either using your defenders to build a navy and then going for the riding branch to get trade and roads and maybe eventually chivalry. The defenders' battleships and customs houses trinity is an old sort of meta strategy, but it's the only way I can really find to make the defenders a tribe start with any use at all, as opposed to just ignoring them and using a typical strategy, which I thought would be a waste to be honest. It's an effective strategy if you get it right, but you need to be careful to balance building a navy and expanding outwards, to make sure that the moment you get navigation you have enough of an economy to keep pace with other tribes and buy expensive battleship promotions. You'll be researching a lot of technology and that's going to require a lot of stars, which requires efficient and effective upgrading of cities, and that's not an easy thing to do all of the time. Here roads will be your main economic and land military tech, allowing your troops quick movement around the empire and allowing you to pop giants in your capital to build stronger battleships to take cities later. In this strategy, I would recommend just chopping all of your trees if you have enough to justify researching forestry. Don't hesitate to do that if you can get a profit out of it. The second strategy is the more experimental one, which bases itself around cloaks and their potential for taking down cities quickly. The inherent weakness of a cloak is that it's basically useless at defending, since you can only really use it to attack cities. You can use it as a blocker, but it's very expensive for a blocking unit when you could just use, let's say, warriors for instance. The defenders aren't bad in this one, because you can use them for holding down cities given that cloaks have no defensive value, as I already said. If you do this, I also suggest climbing if the terrain has any mountains, because the defense bonus you'll get in the mountains with climbing will prevent knights and the like from being able to destroy your dagger troops from the rebellions in one hit. This makes mining and smithery obvious next steps if you have enough in the way of mountains to justify it, more so than philosophy and meditation, which is just generally bad techs. As far as the early game goes, the most important part of the early game is to develop an economic tech. It's nearly always organisation, but it should correspond to the type of resource you have the most of. Organisation is usually the best bet in the long term because it'll be the most common resource in your land if you give it a large enough sample size, most likely. You don't necessarily need to research this straight away. In fact, I would probably recommend just getting a warrior to begin with and later using that to capture a load of cities. You can of course research a tech or two before you take the city to avoid the tech prices going up, and all of this is of course not to discount the value of a good old forestry rush to chop down trees, which does still work, and if you decide to go down this path, I recommend that you leave a couple of lumber huts per city in order to keep your economy live later on with things like workshops. It's not as good as a strategy as it was back when Chop gave 2 stars, but it's still there as an option. Okay, so that's the basis of Quetzali done. Now the last thing we need to talk about is how they compare to other tribes, because players are quite predictable, and quite typically you'll end up with players who play the same tribes frequently, so if you're playing in PvP it's often useful to know whether your tribe will be helpful in that matchup or not. Quetzali is not really an early game tribe in any regard. Yes, it looks like they have an early game unit that's quite strong, but in reality they can't match up to the likes of Illyrion or even just a normal tribe like Imo, just simply because defenders can't put pressure on anyone. Yes, you can put a defender next to their capital and they can't attack it. Yes, sure, you can hamper the movement of riders, which makes them fairly strong against someone like Umaji. But then again, Umaji can just completely ignore your defender and build a unit in their city every now and again, and then what are you doing there? You're just looking like a bit of an idiot with your defenders near their capital. So it is good for hampering the movement of tribes who base their troops around movement, so you are fairly strong early game against tribes like Umachi. But to be honest, I would just recommend playing a turn 0 tribe in most situations. Late game though, you can have competition with tribes like Aquarion in the water, and even Polaris perhaps, because of the fact that you can have those defenders being pumped out maybe at a faster rate than other tribes, but honestly, the difference is quite negligible, and even then, Imperius just tends to be stronger. The problem with Quetzali isn't really so much that they're bad, because that can be worked around. It's the fact that for me, their playstyle is a little bit slow, a little bit boring. I haven't got into that because this is a competitive series of videos. I'm talking about how viable they are from a competitive standpoint, not whether I find them fun. But honestly, I just find they fall a little bit flat for me personally. If you enjoy playing Quetzali though, I wish you the best of luck and I hope this video has helped you. Until the next one, goodbye.